All right. Law number 99. Keep it simple, stupid. World champion athletes know the importance of this one. This is a big one because we all get in states of overwhelm. And the worst times are when you're training hard and you're down and out, you're very susceptible, you have no reserves. And that's when things go wrong. That's when you make poor choices. That's where you end up injured. That's where you end up sick. And so, things like motivation and willpower, you've got to look at these like precious commodities. You don't get to have them all the time. They run dry, and you've got to restock and you've got to recover. You've got to replenish these. So, world champion athletes know they've got to keep it simple because if not, if you allow too many things, people, places, and other things in your life, you're draining these precious resources. It's just like this picture here. You will drain all of that. If you spread yourself too thin, you get to a point where you're very susceptible to these poor choices, whether it's uncontrolled emotions or saying something you shouldn't say. You have create long-term damage in relationships with teammates, coaches, spouse, partner. And so, not only that, but the deleterious effects on your immune system. So, you've got to be careful. You've got to protect your resources and make sure you're not changing everything, ruining a very good plan just because you're down and out and spread yourself way too thin. Because we only have a finite number of resources, it's not infinite. And so, if you've got all these things just draining you all the time, and you have to realize where you place your attention is very important because you could drain, you build up some motivation, you're feeling good and you're working hard. You could drain all of that out of your system with one simple toxic encounter, one big argument with someone, with your spouse or partner, can ruin that state of mind. So we got to be aware and we got to beware of this cognitive overload, taking on way too much. We have approximately 60,000 thoughts each day. And the problem is that most of them are the same thoughts we had yesterday and the day before. So you got to pay attention. And this is where your recovery is so important. You got to pay attention to this mental overwhelm. You take on too much, you start getting confused, make bad decisions, particularly when you're tired and down and out. It becomes a burden, and then you have all this information bombardment. And end up with this mental fatigue and just drains your resources. And the big thing you've got to do is be able to create your own boundaries and say stop or say no. And that goes to all the toxic people, places, and things in your life. Is management guru Harvey Mackay has said uh, in his writings, say no until your tongue bleeds. You've got to learn to say no until your tongue bleeds. Because this state of cognitive dissonance, which is when what you're doing, what you're thinking is out of line of what you want to be doing, what you want to be thinking. So you've got to take some time because this is a very toxic state of being. This is very toxic to your brain, to your immune system, and of course to your athletic performance. One other technique is to declutter your life. Like, look at everything you're doing, look at everything you're involved in, look at everything in your home, look at everything that you spend your time and attention on. Because we can all get rid of a lot of the excess, a lot of the waste, a lot of the wasted time. And this creates some peace, it creates some recovery, it creates some time in your life to get better. Here's a nice slide of life balance. And so we're all constantly moving these knobs back and forth based on what's important in our life. And it's just like in training, periodization. We have different periods of doing different things to focus on different areas. You do this in your life as well, of course. Um, in the off season, you're going to spend more time focusing on your family and recreation and your social life. And then, as you get into the season, those things get moved down to minimal and you're focused more on your training and performance. But it's a constant flow and you've got to make adjustments because if you think you're going to have it all, you're fooling yourself. That's where people end up with this cognitive overload, cognitive dissonance, and sickness, injury, poor performance. And here we go. I'm going to say it a million times. The more you hear me repeat something, the more important it is. This is what world champion athletes do. So just listen, get your pen and paper out, sit down. Like I said, keep it simple, stupid. That's a hallmark of world champion athletes. Write down what you're doing, write down what you want to be doing. Plan your day, plan your week, plan your year, and spend some time auditing yourself and being the CEO of everything that is you. And one of the simple techniques is to practice what we call metacognition, and that's thinking about the way you're thinking. And that's where taking that pencil and paper, sitting down, writing out things you want to do, writing out the things you're doing, and identifying the things that can be eliminated, things that can be improved, but really thinking deeply about what you're doing. And it's in this process is where we learn how to learn. And so we find answers, we find solutions when we think deeply, we write out our problems, and we look at all the areas of our life. This is where we find solutions and we find improvement. And deep inside, these are real changes. This is the process of neuroplasticity. So when we focus on the things we want to do, those pathways responsible for those things get better. They get bigger. They transmit signals faster. It's cleaner. It's more precise. And ultimately, you just get better. And once again, it's not complicated. I'll keep it simple. Just assess whatever problem you're facing or anything you want to fix. Evaluate your strength and weaknesses. Plan. Here's the key: planning, and then of course executing. You can make a plan, but you've got to execute it. And then coming back, and you come back to this cycle over and over and over because every single time, and world champion athletes know this, you're creating a better version of yourself. And again, you've got to have a plan. You got to have a daily plan, a weekly plan, a plan for your microcycle, mesocycle for the competitive season for the year, long-term plan. Because otherwise, it'd be like playing basketball or football or soccer and not having any plays. It is, everybody out there, all right, let's go. That worked when we were 4, 5, 6 years old, but past that, you've got to have, just like these athletes have got to have plays, you got to have a plan. And so ultimately, you want to create the simplest plan, simplest version possible. Get your priorities straight, focus your attention, what's important, create your plan, and then you come back, back over and over and over again, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it is. You just keep checking in, you keep reviewing, you keep thinking deeply, keep auditing yourself. Are you really doing the things you should be doing? Because every time you do this, you strengthen those neural networks, and those are your performance networks. Those are the ones that are going to improve your health, your fitness, and your athletic performance. And one of the nice byproducts of this is that you'll find that all those toxic thoughts, those toxic people, toxic places, and things in your life will start to recede. And you get a much clearer picture moving forward, and you will improve. Thanks for watching.